Gavin Newsom's recall election is officially tomorrow. Or another way to phrase it is tomorrow is the last day to vote. And there's already a bunch of stories of weird goings on. In this story, voters in the San Fernando Valley are saying they're having trouble casting their ballots because when they went in to vote, they were told, you already voted, which is strange. The media is calling it a glitch, saying it's no big deal. These people have filled out their provisional ballots. And let's be real. It's one story about one area with a handful of voters experiencing a problem. The last thing we need is for people to come out and claim that this story is widespread, massive fraud or evidence of a rigged election or anything like that. Now, it's important we track these stories. It's important we use them for what they are. I mean, probable cause, not indicative, not direct evidence of anything like that, but enough to be like, okay, this may be a problem, maybe a glitch, maybe malicious, maybe nefarious. We'll investigate it, right? But for the time being, I actually think we should look at these stories, calm everybody down, push them to the side for now. What I mean is, don't ignore them completely. But people should be focused on getting out and voting and not being told that the election's rigged and you can't win, because that is not true. For all of the weird goings on and all of the problems, you can go out and vote and you can win. And despite what anyone might tell you about the last election in 2020, Republicans crushed it in the House. Now, you can believe whatever you want to believe about these elections, but the one thing remains true is that you must go out and vote. Vote for what you believe in. Vote. Well, in my opinion, I think Newsom should be recalled. I believe he's corrupt. I think Larry Elder would be a breath of fresh air for a one-party controlled state. And I think the Democrats in California have lost the plot completely. The last thing we need is for people to feel like you can't win. That being said, I do not believe in suppressing information and the news based on what I want to happen and, my opinions on what these things really mean. In fact, I think it's important we go through some of what's happening. And the latest news is that Larry Elder has set up a page on his website, or there is a website set up, they say, from Larry Elder, so that you can document these goings on. By all means, I think that's fair and you should do so. And Donald Trump is claiming it's rigged. Now, Mike Cernovich came out, prominent Trump supporter in the past, says this is voter suppression. Telling people the day before an election it's rigged and you can't win? Yeah, that's going to make people not come out. That's the biggest thing I see with this narrative about fraud. So many people are throwing their hands in the air and saying, oh, I'm done. No. Do not let anyone have that mentality. You must do your civic duty. Go door to door. Advocate for who you want to win. Advocate for the vote. Go out and vote yourself, and don't let anyone get you down for any reason, regardless of whether or not it's their intent. You go out and you do what you got to do. Now, a lot of people are concerned about what's going on, and I think it's fair to say that there's reasons to be concerned for sure. And I want to go through these things, and I want to make sure that even with, everything you're going to see, you recognize the importance of you going out to vote. And we'll raise some questions about this. We'll be skeptical. Like I said, I am not a person who thinks, oh, look at these stories about weird goings on. I better not tell anyone because it might actually scare them. Now, I can criticize Cernovich a little bit when he tweets out, he tweeted out that saying there's, the election's rigged, a suppression. I actually think he's right. And I'll push back a little bit saying we still should let people know the news and then assure them and encourage them to go out and participate in civics. There are bad people. They do bad things. Don't let one or two news stories hold you back. Tomorrow is the last day to vote in California. This is massive. Yo, Larry Elder as governor? Wow, that would be huge. And while I don't completely agree with his politics, for the most part, my issues are more about rationality, peaceful, persuasive resourcefulness, and ending mono-party rule in California, at least for a little while. Give them a breath of fresh air. We got to have some balance back in this country. Well, let's read these stories, see what's going on. Before we get started, head over to timcast.com, become a member, and you'll get access to exclusive members-only content, like segments in the Timcast IRL podcast, as well as an ad-free experience on all of our news, and you will be supporting our fierce and independent journalism. But don't forget to like this video, subscribe to this channel, and share this show with your friends, both as I attempt to inform you and encourage you at the same time, remaining optimistic despite the negative news. So let's walk through this data and see what's going on. I think it's fair to point out this story from KTLA San Fernando Valley residents have trouble casting recall ballots. Many people are sharing the story saying, look, this shows there's malintent, that something nefarious is afoot. Perhaps. Let's talk about it. But let's make sure everyone holds the line, holds the center, and go out and vote for what you believe in. Look, maybe you're somebody who watches my show and you don't like Larry Elder and you think he's a really bad person. I want you to vote too. I want everyone to vote. And while I wish that the people who voted were better informed, who would make the right decisions, I am not the arbiter of truth and morality. I am no psychic, no genius. I think more people voting is probably a good thing. How about that? Let's read. Some San Fernando Valley voters think they are being wrongly prevented from casting a ballot in the upcoming gubernatorial recall election. At El Camino Real Charter High School in Woodland Hills, some voters say they were told the computers showed them as already having voted, even though they had not. West Hills resident Estelle Bender, 88, said she was far from the only person who was being told incorrectly that they had already voted. In addition to friends of hers who experienced the issue and two other men outside the polling place, Bender said that inside, quote, the man next to me was arguing the same thing. Bender said she filled out a provisional ballot and left really angry. Bender added, to her knowledge, many of those affected by the issue are self-identified Republicans, and she's suspicious. I'd still like to know how I voted, Bender said. The LA County Registrar Recorder's Office said in a statement that provisional ballots are a fail-safe option to ensure that everyone's votes are counted. Once the eligibility of the voter is verified, the ballots are processed and counted, the statement added. Now, I can't tell you much about this other than one woman made a statement about what happened to the press, and the press covered it, and it's a handful of people. Could be a blip. You got to be careful about static, right? That sometimes you'll get blips in the signal. It doesn't mean anything unless we see a pattern. Now, people are already predisposed to believe that there is malintent because you've got the media, you've got, Mike Lindell's symposium, you've got statements from Donald Trump. And I think it's important to point out that whatever you end up believing, you don't let it get you down or hold you back. Check this out. Gavin Newsom blasts President Trump and for feigning election fraud and CA recall. We're 4 days out. The election hasn't even happened. And now they're all feigning election fraud. I don't trust anybody. The election is tomorrow. I do not trust anybody. You see that story? I'm glad they reported it. Let's get some investigators on scene to go through it now before the election. You see, here's the funny thing about Gavin Newsom criticizing Trump. Sure, Trump shouldn't be involved, okay? Trump should stay back, let California do its thing. There's a lot of people in California. Like I mentioned, Mike Cernovich, he lives there. They're fighting for the recall. Let me say something. Gavin Newsom is saying the election hasn't happened yet and they're already calling this out. Now is the time to call it out. You see, if it turns out that Larry Elder ends up winning, well, then you will have their statements where they're like, oh, see, they were calling out. Let's investigate. I'm down for that if Larry Elder ends up winning. Before anyone has won is the time you start actually looking into these claims. That's the best time to literally do it. Governor Gavin Newsom Friday blasted Republicans and former President Trump for feigning election fraud in the California recall election. It's just a remarkable thing. We're 4 days out. The election hasn't even happened. And now they're all feigning election fraud, Newsom told reporters in Sacramento after casting his own ballot at the California Museum. It's just an extension of the big lie, the stop the steal. It's just a remarkable thing. On Wednesday, GOP frontrunner Larry Elder told reporters that he believes, quote, there might very well be shenanigans in the recall election, despite there being no evidence of any wrongdoing in the voting process. Elder's campaign also has a link on their website that asks voters to fill out a form to report incidents of voter fraud. I just want to stop. And when they say no evidence of any wrongdoing is a very loaded statement. If there was evidence of wrongdoing, there would be direct evidence of wrongdoing. We haven't investigated anything. This is my point. Don't let any of this get you down. I'm going to say that 50 billion times. I want you to be sure. You'll be sure of that. But here's my point. People being told they already voted is a red flag so large you can see it from your from your front yard. Right? A massive red flag. But it's probable cause. It could be an error. It could be a glitch. It could be someone with the same name. Who knows? Or it could be something malicious. It's not evidence of wrongdoing. It's evidence of something going wrong. Now we investigate and potentially look for wrongdoing. How about that? You see, this is the problem I have with the media. Despite there being no evidence of any wrongdoing, why would you add that in the story? It has nothing to do with what's being said or who's being criticized. You see how they played the game. The day before, former President Trump also promoted the baseless claims. You see, there you go. Baseless. We have people in San Fernando saying they've already voted. We have a couple other stories I want to show you. In fact, I got to stop right there. I'm sorry. I was wrong when I said there was no evidence of any wrongdoing. I'm sorry, when I said that wrongdoing hasn't been investigated yet and there's probable cause. I'm sorry, that's incorrect. First, let me just show you this story from the AP. Passed out man found with 300 California recall ballots. This guy was charged with forgery. Literally evidence of wrongdoing. Do your job, media. Passed out man. California authorities are investigating why a man found passed out in his car had more than 300 unopened mail-in ballots for the gubernatorial recall election. The man was arrested August 16th after being found in a store parking lot in Torrance. Investigators at the Torrance Police Special Investigations Division, the U.S. Postal Service, and L.A. County District Attorney's Public Integrity Unit were trying to determine how the ballots ended up in the suspect's vehicle and what his intent was in having them, police said in a Facebook statement. Sergeant Mark Ponagilic told KABC-TV the ballots were unopened and had not been tampered with. The man was a felon who had drugs, a loaded firearm, thousands of pieces of mail, a scale, and multiple California driver's licenses and credit cards and other people's names. The man, whose name was not released, was arrested for investigation of weapons, narcotics, and forgery violations. Replacement ballots will be sent out, police said. Okay, what was that, ABC7? No evidence of any wrongdoing? That was evidence of wrongdoing. How do you end up with 300 ballots and drugs and a gun? Okay. Is it proof of widespread fraud? It's not. And here's what you got to watch out for. You got a lot of people want to push conspiracy theories. And I'm not saying that in a negative way to insult people who believe that nefarious people behind the scenes do bad things. People who work for big corporations often work with other big corporations, and sometimes they do bad things. That happens, and politicians do bad things. People do bad things. But let me just point out that there may be fraud in many places. In fact, there have been many throughout the last year. We went through the DOJ announcing like this person was doing ballot harvesting. Someone in Philly was like, stuffing ballot boxes. These were smaller scale stuff. Some of them may have had impacts. Take it up with the DOJ to figure out where those things went. Here's another conspiracy theory for you. And I'm saying this as a way to kind of neutralize the conspiracy stories. What if the real conspiracy was that these stories are seeded to suppress conservative votes? Think about it. Republicans throw their hands in the air feeling like they can't possibly win because the game is rigged and they don't show up. That is bad. We saw that in Georgia, maybe not as widespread as many people in the media were claiming. That when Trump was claiming fraud, a lot of Republicans were like, I'm not voting. What's the point? No, go out and vote. Ignore that stuff. Keep put in your back pocket. Make sure it gets investigated, all that stuff. But what if that's the real conspiracy? Now, I don't think so. I think humans are imperfect. No election is going to be perfect. Bad people are going to do bad stuff. It doesn't mean that you can swing an election because one guy was found in his car. It does mean there's probable cause to investigate further how this came to be. It is not evidence of a racket or widespread. I'm sorry, it's not. Is it bad? Yes. Should it be investigated? Yes. Are there people doing bad things, trying to manipulate elections? Yes. They've been arrested, like I mentioned, the DOJ. Stay focused right now. You can vote. I believe they have early voting right now. Tomorrow is the last day to vote. You can vote by mail. Go out and vote. Ignore the screaming in your ears. Ignore the noise. Don't let these stories stop you or anyone you know. That's their goal, man. They say, the day before, former President Donald Trump also promoted his baseless claims. During an interview on Newsmax, Trump predicted it's a rigged election. It's probably rigged. They're sending out all ballots. The ballots are, mail-in ballots, Trump said, adding that it will help Democrats win. Now, Trump is wrong about just saying it's rigged, but depends on what he means by rigged, okay? Are we speaking literally or is he being hyperbolic? I'll tell you this. Mass mail-in voting helps Democrats for, I would say, two principal reasons. The first, it makes it a lot easier for younger people to vote, many who aren't paying attention, and for their parents to be like, did you vote yet? If you want to go to Billy's house for the pizza, you fill out your ballot. And it's like some kid who's like 18 or whatever, and he just out of high school, or maybe he's about to go to college soon, or maybe they're in college still living at home. The other thing it does is because the left is really good at organizing. You do mass mail-in voting, they have a month to go door to door, and this is what they've been doing. Have Republicans been? Perhaps. I'm not entirely sure. I've definitely seen the Democrat efforts. See, the issue I take with the fraud narrative is that regardless of whether or not it's true or you can prove it or otherwise, it suppresses people, the right, distracts them from the bigger issue. Universal mail-in voting. Now, instead of going door to door on election day, asking people to go down to vote and them being like, I don't want to leave my house. I just ordered pizza and I'm going to go watch this sporting event or whatever. Now, throughout the month, activists can go door to door, tell people to vote, and they'll be like, oh, yeah, sure, whatever. And they'll fill it out and they'll say, I'll put it in the mailbox. And then the mailman will come pick it up. It makes it super easy to vote. Now, Democrats cheer for this, saying it should be easier to vote. I think there should be some hurdles. I think if people don't even want to get out of their house to go vote one day, then maybe they shouldn't, but it's up to them. And making it easier to vote is not fraud. Organizing and going out and getting active is not fraud. You can argue they're changing the rules to benefit themselves. My response to Republicans is get on your ground game. I know for a fact the left is better at ground organizing. I've seen it. I've worked for some of these fundraising companies that do, nonprofit stuff, nonprofit work fundraising. Republicans got to go door to door. They got to be personable. They got to be persuasive, resourceful, knock on doors and say, hey, did you vote yet? Go out to these areas, argue, convince people. The left does it all day, every day. Quote, the one thing they're good at is rigging elections. So I predict it's a rig election, Trump said. I think that's a big mistake. A new poll from the Berkeley Institute of Governmental Studies released on Friday showed the recall is likely to fail by wide margins. 60% of likely voters are against the recall compared to 39% of voters who say they are for it. Bad metric. It's a bad metric because while many people may be against the recall, how many of them actually are paying attention to an off-cycle, off-season election? Out of the people who are paying attention to this and answering the polls, I'd be willing to bet the Republicans are coming out in force, angry, fists on the table. We got to get Gavin out of there. And the Democrats are like, what's happening? Who's running for what? That's right. And it's a recall election, so maybe some people don't even understand. They say the margins align with the California electorate at large. In the state, Democrats outnumber Republicans 2-1. Hey, makes sense. But are you polling people who are likely to vote or people who are not likely to vote? It's a recall. It's not a midterm. It's not. I mean, look, the Democrats are good at organizing, so it may not matter in the end. And the polls have been shifting in favor of Newsom, but maybe some of these Democrats are fed up. We'll see. On Friday, Newsom also called out Trump for continuing to perpetuate claims of voter fraud. It's not surprising, but once again disappointing, that you see folks even here in California, including the president himself, who asserted similar comments a few weeks back, make such outrageous statements with no basis in evidence whatsoever. I got to stop you right there. Evidence does not mean proof, and evidence of wrongdoing does not mean hard evidence of widespread fraud or anything like that. It means, we better pay attention to this stuff and investigate it. That's why I'm totally in favor of audits. I'm totally in favor of auditing every single election in the country. Hard audits, do it. Spend the money. We need to restore confidence in the system. Too many people feel like the system is broken, and that's going to create a serious imbalance. And if the right stops believing in the elections because of news they heard, and the left ends up just sweeping everything, we're just getting closer and closer to collapse. Let's talk about evidence or whatever, How about this one? Jeremy Boring says, and this is I believe he's the CEO, co-CEO of Daily Wire, just got my absentee ballot for the California recall. I moved to Tennessee in November, registered to vote here, and submitted a voter registration cancellation form for CA within a month of leaving. Let's give these bureaucrats control of our healthcare next. All right. Well, I don't see any hard photo evidence there, Jeremy. How about this one from Colin Moriarty? Colin Moriarty is not some hardcore conservative. He's a PlayStation podcaster. He tweeted, "Good news. I haven't lived in California since 2019, but I got a gubernatorial recall ballot sent to me in Virginia. Ha ha ha. Love it." And he posted photos of having received these ballots to Virginia. Here's the best part. In one image, you can see County of Los Angeles Register Recorder, P.O. Box, LA, yada, yada, to Mr. Colin Moriarty, and there's Virginia on it. How is a gubernatorial ballot being sent to Virginia? Okay. Evidence does not mean definitive proof. Evidence just means a fact or piece of data or circumstance that points to a potential outcome. So, what do we see here? Something bad. Believe whatever you want to believe about it. Something bad happened. Maybe it's a mistake, a glitch, maybe intentional. I don't know. And I got to be honest, I don't know if I care all that much. I really don't. Don't focus on this right now. We can take a look at it. It should be investigated. But let's see what those in California have to say. Mike Cernovich, as you know, big Trump supporter, critical of Trump when he needed to be, says, "Man, I tried to keep Trump out of the California recall, but he just can't help himself. Now he's running another Georgia-style voter suppression effort. No one here asked for his help, quote unquote. In fact, people worked to keep him out of it." Cernovich says, "Telling people on the eve of an election that it's rigged is voter suppression. Trump is literally suppressing pro-recall votes. Unreal that so many of you idiots can't see this. Unfollow me." I agree with Cernovich. There's a predicament. There really is. I'm not here to be a moral authoritarian or dictator demanding an outcome that I want. If I wanted Larry Elder to win, there's a lot of things that I could be doing. I didn't donate to the guy. There's a lot of stuff, right? I could be donating to the recall effort. I don't. Personally, I think he should. I don't live in California. Maybe that's the problem, is that people who challenge the Democrats and people like Newsom don't do enough. Could be the case. I do think it's fair to say that there are a lot of people in California, when it's already, disproportionately Democrat, a lot of people who are sitting there thinking, like, what's the point of getting up and going out if it's rigged anyway? Isn't it convenient for Democrats that demoralization is slapping the right in the face? I'm not a fan of that. I want to see the people go out and vote. I want to see them well informed. I want to see them make decisions that's right for themselves. I think Gavin Newsom is crooked and one of the worst possible choices. He should be recalled. He shouldn't have been elected. But, I don't complain about Newsom getting elected because we're like, we'll see what happens, right? And then we see him enacting these restrictions and then defying them. We see the problems California faces in LA and San Francisco and Sacramento with homelessness and human waste. Gavin Newsom is not doing right by California. Problem? Tribalism just sweeps over everything. And you've got now the left just saying, we're going to vote for him because Republicans are bad. That's why the Democrats have branded this the Republican recall. Because they just want to be like, you're not a right winger, are you? And then these spineless California types who used to actually stand up to this stuff, so desperate to fit in, just fall in line and say, tell me whatever. I'm so scared. I'll say whatever you tell me to say. I'll vote for whoever. I think it's funny. There's probably a lot of people who would vote for recall and lie about it. I mentioned this in a few segments recently. I've been binge watching 30 Rock, because we actually drove several hours. We went to on this trip. So we watched nothing but like 30 Rock on the way there. There's one episode in like season 3, I think, where, oh no, this is season 1, isn't it? Yeah, I think it was in season 1, where Tina Fey's character, Liz Lemon, says, revealing one of her darkest secrets, she's going to tell all of her friends she voted for Obama, but would secretly vote for McCain. It's really interesting. Seriously, go back and watch 30 Rock. The show is from 2006 to 2013. And you will see the supposed left embracing what is called right wing today. It's really weird. They would never make that. They wouldn't make that show again. I don't think so. But you can just see how there's probably a lot of Democrats who will vote to recall and then lie about it. So are these polls correct? Let me just remind you of how wrong the polls were in the past several elections. Did we forget? No, I didn't. So while they come out and they say the polls are really bad for the recall effort, here's 538. Let me just pull up the polling average instead of just reading their analysis of their own polling average. Opponents of Democratic Governor Newsom have gathered enough signatures to trigger a recall election on September 14th, only the 4th gubernatorial recall election in U.S. history. If a majority of recall voters vote yes, Newsom will be removed from office. They say right now, the aggregate shows no recall at 57.5% and remove at 40.8%. I am not convinced this is accurate. Now, plus 16.6 is a huge margin to be wrong about. I wouldn't be surprised if they were wrong, because they were wrong in 2020, they were wrong in 2018, and they were wrong in 2016. The polls are a broken. Why? Cancel culture, probably. No joke. Cancel culture. People are scared to speak up because they'll be canceled. So how many Democrats hate Newsom so much they don't care who wins? And let's be real. Recalling Newsom, Larry Elder gets in maybe, and he gets what? A year? Can't do a whole lot. But at least it would send a message to the Democrats. I think there's good enough reason for progressives in California to be like, dude, recall. Larry Elder won't be able to do anything. It'll send a huge message to Democrats and force them to change or do whatever. I think it's possible. Now, at the very least, there are many smart people, many on the right, who have said they don't think Newsom will be recalled. I don't know. I honestly don't know. I think you see all these polls telling you it's impossible. You see all these people saying it's rigged. And I'm like, ignore all of that. We know the polls are wrong. OK, and don't let this demoralization about rigged elections or whatever get you down. Shut it down. Keep the stuff in your back pocket. Don't forget it. It's interesting evidence of something, of maybe error, maybe wrongdoing. We don't know. But don't let it stop you from going out and vote, man. You got to get out there and tell people. You got to get out there and be active. Now's the time. Every single person who's at least watching this, who's in California, should be knocking on doors and ringing doorbells and saying, like, here's what's up. You got a minute? And you know what? It's hard. It's really hard. You get rejected. You get yelled at. People can be mean. But I tell you this, Democrats do it, and boy, do they do it well. Going door to door, standing on street corners, making phone calls. They do a much better job than Republicans. Republicans just rely on process victory. Like, we got a bunch of judges in. Well, what did you do to actually convince people that you were right other than install a judge who's going to tell them they're wrong? And then when they're following the narrative of CNN, they're like, these judges are bad judges. Maybe if you go out and affect culture, inspire people, inform them, they'll then be like, we don't need the judges because the judge's ruling is based on the perception of culture. But this is where we are right now. And as long as people keep falling for this demoralization, look at this. You got Emerson, Data for Progress, Survey USA, Suffolk. These are universities, okay? These are not right-wing organizations. Maybe, Rasmussen might show something better if they're actually tracking this, which I don't think. Rasmussen is not appearing in the aggregate for 538. We can see that things have gradually, it used to be pretty close. It used to be that Remove and Keep were bouncing back and forth. Now it's just dominated by Keep. The Democrats have ramped up the pressure. Joe Biden's flying out. They are getting involved. And we have stories like this. SF Gate says, even Gavin Newsom's least optimistic pollster thinks recall is a beatdown. They say in March, the pollster found Newsom defeating the recall by 4 points, which contrasted other polls from the spring showed Newsom leading by double digits. Then in July and August, Emerson and Nexstar was the first pollster that showed a tightening race. Now, one day before the election, Emerson Nexstar's final poll looks a lot like other final polls. Newsom will survive the recall by a very large margin. And I don't care. And you shouldn't either. In fact, you know what? This should rile you up. This should light a flame underneath you. Passion, saying, you know what? This is not the time to retreat. Now is the time to redouble your efforts. If the center isn't holding, you must reinforce the center, not break. I'm reminded of that scene in The Patriot with Mel Gibson. You ever see that movie? Awesome movie. Where everyone starts retreating, and then he grabs the American flag and says, no, hold the line. And he runs forward, and he's charging as people are retreating, and they stop, and they see him, and they turn, and they start running back. And then they defeat him. They defeat Cornwallis. It's an awesome movie. It's an awesome, awesome movie. Actually, I think that was the scene where he's like, no, don't break the line. And that's what you gotta remember. That story. You ever hear the story, maybe apocryphal, maybe legend of the Star-Spangled Banner and what that national anthem meant? The bombs bursting in air gave proof through the night that the flag was still there. What did that mean? Well, as legend tells it, as the bombs exploded, there would be a flash of light in the darkness, revealing the American flag standing strong. And as they tell the story, which is probably just legend at this point, after the war or the battle had ended. And they went into that fort. What did they see? The bodies of patriots piled up holding that flag up, because every time the flag would go down, someone would run up and pull the flag back up, even under bombardment, knowing they wouldn't survive it. It's really amazing. It's an amazing story, isn't it? That even though they knew they wouldn't make it, that flag must stand. So here's what I see. They can tell me everything. They can say it's suppressed, it's rigged. They can say the polls it's pointless, don't even bother coming out. And I say, the bombs bursting in air will give proof through the night that the recall is still there. And until the fat lady sings, y'all cannot let this stuff demoralize you, ever. In any election, for any reason, no matter what Trump says, no matter what Newsom says, no matter what the pollsters say, you should be staying true to what you believe in. And that means, if this is what really always bothered me growing up. The people who come out and say we need collective action because we're not getting paid enough. And I'm like, my friends would be like servers, and they'd say the law should change. It's not fair they don't pay us enough. And I was like, so quit. Like, but I need my job. I'm like, so go get a different job. Well, but I like my job. Okay. If every single one of your coworkers agreed with you and you all one day just said we won't work, they'd give you a raise on the spot. What are they going to do? Shut down the store and lose all their money, or cut you in on it? But they don't do it. That always bothered me. It's not about what everyone else is willing to do. It's about what you are willing to do. Because if you're willing to do it and everyone else has the same mindset, you win. It reminds me of third-party votes, too. People are like, don't vote third party because then you'll take votes away from the other party. And like when Hillary lost, like, the Green Party did this. The Green Party voters have no obligation to vote for Democrats. Libertarian voters have no obligation to vote for Republicans. And if every single person in this country stood on principle, instead of voting on fear of the other, maybe we'd get a good president. Or a bad one. I don't know. We get something different at the very least. Now, Trump was different. I actually thought Trump was worth voting for a lot of his policy positions, and because he's anti-establishment. I like the Mises Caucus now. I don't completely agree with anybody, and I always say that, but I'll take liberty over everything else. And you know what that means? We'll see what happens come 2024. I am not the person to vote against. I hate that idea. I would prefer every single person just said, we like Dave Smith and Michael Malice in the Mises Caucus, so we'll vote for them. And then when they win, people will be like, wow, people stood on principle. Instead, people stand on fear. That's the problem. Do not be afraid and do not fear the outcome. You got to go out, shoot your shot. Don't, look, it's like the same with dating. You go out to a bar, you see a pretty lady. The worst case scenario is if you go up and say, hey, nice to meet you, let me buy you a drink. If she says no, you say, sorry for bothering you, have a nice day. You don't have a guarantee in life, okay? What's the only guarantee is death and taxes, right? So I'll tell you this. Tomorrow, the final day, you might lose. Maybe. It doesn't matter whether you might lose or not. It matters whether or not you are willing to stand up and say, at the very least, my voice will be heard. Worry about this stuff after the fact. For now, get to vote. Get your friends to vote. Vote for what you believe in. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 8 p.m. over at youtube.com/TimCastIRL. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.